let's talk about the Expanse a little bit. Let's wrap it up with that because I finished watching the fifth seasons this week. That was quite fun for me. Very much enjoyed it. So, did you watch it recently? When did you watch it? Is it still
Well,
kind of fresh
as it was being released regularly
release?
at that
Okay.
time.
So apparently there's like 9 books now, I guess. So there's still I don't know what there's 5 seasons, so there's still potentially 4 more seasons, I guess, that they could make. I'm not sure if they'll make all of them or not, but
They
it's been
won't.
renewed.
I think they will make 1 or 2 tops most is the plan.
Yeah, maybe. Yes, they might wrap it up with 6. Have you read the books at all, or did you get into any of the books?
Just a little bit. Just after I've seen the
Okay.
show, that I've read some parts of the books.
I've been thinking of going back because I'm kind of curious how it all wraps up. But I just wanted to toss out a few fun little plot holes that I kind of saw and see if you saw the same
Ah,
ones. The biggest plot hole I see with all of it is the whole what do you call it, space drive, fusion Epstein engine
yeah.
technology, and how they're always basically speeding up, right? 1G typically. And they didn't have any artificial gravity at all, right? It was
No,
basically
that's how
just
they create the artificial
gravity through
gravity is
1G,
by
right?
acceleration
So yeah, so it looked
or
like in order to do
deceleration.
that, yeah, basically the ship would have to be that down would always be to the back of the ship, right? They'd have to design their ships so that they're always accelerating 1G. So to get 1G gravity, you'd have to have kind of all the floors at an angle that the
Well,
back of the ship is down,
you build
right?
it like a tower.
Okay, yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. So down is always the direction that you're,
Yeah,
the
the
opposite of the
engines.
direction you're moving, right? So but then when they go super fast, like 5G or whatever, all of a sudden they're going from down to being pushed backwards in their chairs, right? Like the chairs push. So it's like it didn't make any sense at all to me that like this
Hmm.
is down, but then all of a sudden at 5G it's the other direction.
I think
I don't know if you
that's a
noticed
really
that.
good point. I think there is some like a movie language thing
Yeah, yeah,
that's going on.
you have to give it a grain of salt, but I love it because I really do think there's a lot of realism to these shows. But if you miss key points like that, then it kind of takes away all the other good realism, right? Because you have to actually be realistic with your physics in order to kind of make any of this stuff apply. The other major part of it is as far as slowing down, right?
Hmm.
So if you speed up at 1G for however long, a couple hours, however long you're traveling, that's pretty darn fast at 1G, right? With you'll get to Mars in a matter of
Yeah,
days.
yeah, that's days
Um,
across the solar
just
system.
go, yeah, just going 1G steady for I think even a day, and you're basically then you have to start slowing down for just as long as you were speeding
Yeah,
up,
like from
right?
the
In
midpoint. Yeah.
order to stop at Mars. So they had some of that there where sometimes you're seeing scenes where the whole armada is coming backwards towards
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they had I think they hinted at that, but then they completely kind of ignore it whenever you're chasing somebody or whenever you're coming towards somebody. They're
Hmm.
like going straight in and they're going as fast as they can to get there, and then all of a sudden they're there. And it didn't show them turning around and slowing down, right? At all. So I thought that was kind of
Yeah.
hilarious that they'd be just blowing by each other at the speed of light almost,
Yeah, that's
and all of a sudden
I was actually
they're
thinking
stopped.
about these things a lot for the sci-fi game that we're sort of long-term developing with my friends. And yeah, in space, if you wanted to have encounters with ships, which are probably very avoidable if the both ships have engines that are compatible, then you can just fly away always.
Yeah.
But if you want to clash, it would be more like jousting.
Yeah, exactly.
That you
Exactly.
just get like the flyby and exchange fire at a specific distance, unless you have better engines or more fuel in the ship, and your delta V allows you to actually catch up with the ship. So
Yeah.
there are some situations in which you might want to board as opposed to destroy, and then it would look more conventional, like you're really just closing in on, and then you don't have to slow down because the other ship is relatively still moving at the speed is not stationary or slowed down. So
Yeah.
you would just be both moving in some direction, and you would look stationary. Which then I guess maybe that's their sort of excuse. It's like if they're like we caught up and we're the same. Like maybe in the whole system of the solar system, they're like all still moving in some.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do, but like later they just did stuff like with the Nauvoo and the asteroid, where it's like the asteroid was accelerating, and it was,
Yeah.
so they also threw some magic in there, some
There
like
was
space
definitely
magic
some
in there.
the protomolecule had a lot of space magic where it just got rid of gravity entirely or whatever, right? It just had its own artificial gravity.
Like,
So
then again, like yes, if you could crack the physics of it, like you had a gravity drive, then
yeah.
yeah, probably that's how it would work. So it was still somewhat grounded in that, like the assumption was that it was a gravity drive, so it was like a just generating gravity fields, and that's how it
Yeah.
like with the UFOs, the leading theory is that there's a gravity well that's artificially created, and sort of the ship falls into the gravity well. is how it
Mm.
flies forward. It's just I'm still not sure after reading all those theories, like how does it work, like with crossing the light speed barrier. I'm
Yeah.
really not really iffy on that. Like
You need some
nobody
kind of
really.
warp drive. You need like like the wormhole concept is an interesting concept. Like the Expanse had it pretty neat that say that any kind of futuristic, spacefaring, solar system faring civilization should probably develop warp drive of some kind, where they have a wormhole, where you're going into a central station at the edge of your solar system, and you go into your little central zone there, and now you have 1,300 habitable solar systems that are all within wormhole
It's
reach.
also much safer for the civilization to not blow itself up, because one of the what I usually notice, the kind of like with warp engines or faster than light engines, the issue is that how do you limit the possibility of anyone to essentially teleport anywhere instantly all the time, in which
Yeah,
case nothing is defensible.
nothing's
Even if you
defensible.
have the
Yeah,
same crazy technology, you can't even like have encounters with anything other than something stationary, or just a complete
yeah,
craziness unfolds. If
yeah,
you have like mostly sublight, or even if it's gravity drive but it's sublight type of
yeah,
engine, and the interstellar distances can only be traveled through a warp gate or something like that,
yeah. Warp
then
gate.
you can have
Yeah,
pretty stable solar systems, because the ships still have to spend time flying somewhere. So you have a
yeah,
early warning, and you just like know that they're at the gates
yeah,
immediately, and but then you can like catch up or do some like time to prepare or something. So that can
yeah.
work. Like think like civilizations which have just unrestricted, like even if it's like unrestricted, and it doesn't have to be a huge ship, but it could be like something very
A bomb.
small,
Yeah,
like a
just
TARDIS, the like
yeah,
size of a small object that could be faster than light, which
yeah,
can even allow time travel in most like the theoretical physics of how that will work. So then you would
yeah,
okay, everybody has a TARDIS, go. That's not a
yeah.
very like recipe for a stable
No,
civilization.
you get Loki at that point, right? With the whole time continuum police trying
Yeah.
to keep people in check. So it gets super complicated super fast, and I feel like if that were possible, the universe would have destroyed itself, in a multi-dimensional war long ago, just like Loki kind of argues. Um, so I kind of feel like, and I hope that that technology is not possible, and it's whatever created the universe, whether it's an intelligent God or an intelligent being or a super intelligence, made that the law that that would not be possible. That no time travel, no instantaneous travel anywhere. That speed limit, and I liked how the circle in the middle of the Expanse had
Yeah.
like artificial limits, right? They
Yeah,
could set
yeah,
the
yeah.
speed limit to whatever they want. They could change the physics. So that would make a lot of sense to me with any kind of grand designer that would basically allow those kinds of physical limits to be changed whenever they wanted to. Whenever it felt like a society pushed past their limits and were no longer safe and were a danger to themselves. Okay, we're going to change your speed limit now.
Yeah,
So
so
now
one
you're
of
not a
my
danger to yourself
favorite
anymore.
moments was how it, I think at that point it's called Behemoth, what was
Yeah,
previously the Nauvoo, how it stopped
the
it
Nabu, yeah.
like dead in its tracks, and like everybody who wasn't nailed down essentially hit something. And then I
Yeah.
learned there, which doesn't happen often in shows, that apparently wounds don't close in zero G. So it's like a
Yeah, I
whole
didn't know
new,
that either.
completely scientifically accurate, dramatic situation that I've never
Yeah.
seen in any science fiction before, and it's just that's what I really like the kind of
Yeah.
science fiction that
Sounds
I'm
fun.
developing is this kind of let's discover a real world limitation of that sci-fi technology, and limitations is what you build your dramatic tension around. And
Yeah.
so for instance, like one of the examples that I discovered when I was doing my research was, okay, so you have a planetary shield, and the planetary shields are completely covering you from any kind of attack, especially lasers. So
Mhm.
lasers can't get through. Now question, what are lasers?
Light.
Light. So
Just
you have
the
just
concentrated
closed
light.
your planet off from light from space.
Exactly. Doesn't
So
work very well, does
yes.
it?
So now what you have is okay. If you could pull it off, you could have the shield and be defend it yourself that way. Then it's like
Yeah.
a siege situation. You're creating a
Yeah.
siege situation because you still have a limit for how long you can
Well,
survive
you've got
being
to you've got
defended.
to get your power from fusion and geothermal until as long as your core of your planet
Yeah.
gives you
But that's
geothermal
the
energy,
thing.
I guess,
What
right?
about your whole natural ecosystem?
Yeah.
So it's
No.
like you would be able,
Exactly.
you would either have none, or like that. So essentially, dead planets with bases could use shields, or
Yeah.
you would also have to be have enough power, like with from fusion or for something, to
Yeah.
light up like your whole ecosystem, like with
All your
artificial sunlight.
hydroponics. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Anything that
essentially,
mattered, you'd have to light
you
it.
would turn the planetary ecosystem into a hydroponic project. Is essentially what
Exactly
you would
it.
do.
Yeah, it would all become based on, and I think the Matrix kind of talked about that a little bit. You're familiar with the Matrix, right? I'm sure you are. Where they had basically cut off the sun. That's how they
Yeah.
tried to fight against the robots, right? And then the robots basically made humans into the batteries, but they wouldn't necessarily need humans. Obviously, they
No,
could just
no,
use any kind of
that part
fusion.
doesn't make sense.
That wasn't realistic, but we could theoretically survive without the sun if we had to. We just use fusion energy,
Yep.
geothermal energy. There's plenty of energy sources that we could use to make our own light and then make our own hydroponics. So, you know, the sun's great. We get a lot of free energy from it, but it's not necessarily critical to survival once we hit a level of technology where we have even fission to some extent. If we can get these new fission reactors working well, there's more than enough fissionable material on Earth to last us 10,000 years. Even
Yeah.
growing our own food from
Which
from our own
to
light
me
and have a
which to me really makes it an interesting story scenario because it's very analogous to medieval siege. It's just putting it on a whole other level.
yeah
It's like, what does it mean to have
yeah
enough supplies? You need to have like a massive, like levels of power generation that you have, and then
yeah
like the enemy can try to sneak in to sabotage your reactor or something so that the whole thing
exactly
comes down.
yeah. It would, of course, be extremely sad to lose our rainforest and lose all the biodiversity. There might be other unforeseen things from that theoretically, but if we could survive in space, I'm sure we could survive on a barren Earth just the
Yeah,
same, right?
that's
Even
especially
easier. So
what I don't get is like the people who are completely on board with like we can like colonize Mars and then at the same time, but science they can't fix all the problems on Earth. It's like Earth
exactly,
is so
yeah,
much easier to make habitable than any other body in the known
yeah.
universe.
Yeah, so it's all about the dream of pushing further, right? It's the unknown horizon. Whether we build colonies under the ocean, on the ocean, or in Mars, it's all about the next horizon of where we want to build and going somewhere where no one has gone before, just like the early colonists. So I love that concept. I love stories like The Expanse because it kind of definitely focuses in on those. The other kind of problem I had, I think I mentioned it before, is that all the war like parts of particularly the Belters, where they're extremely abused, right? They're essentially slave labor. And it lasted theoretically for hundreds of years where they're built up, they grow in the belt, they live in the belt, and they're essentially treated like subhuman slaves for the Earthers or for even the Martians. And to me, that just seemed like it probably would have blown up long before that. But I guess The Expanse is all about the 100 years building up to this great war, and it
That's
just seems to me like it never would have got that far. Like
well, that's
they
yeah, that's I think that's part of how the saying goes that I think somebody says Einstein said it, and but I'm not sure. It's that science is easy, politics are hard.
yeah
Meaning like if you try to predict the future development, it's usually much easier to guess at the technologies and their capabilities. Even if like you get that wrong a lot, it's still much easier to get close at least to what is going
yeah
to be than the politics. Because usually, if you're in science fiction, political predictions are reflections of current political state. So it's a commentary, and sometimes like very intentional commentary in like sort of disguised in like it's aliens in space or in the future, but it's really like
mm,
about us now and our issues right now. So that's why all of the like ideologies that are later considered absurd or all the political biases of the time are reflected. Like
yeah
you would have like how, for instance, like presumably in the future, like how women would be treated if you read the like very old school science fiction novels. You'd see that like yeah the person thought that it's going to be basically the same, just maybe like a little bit like better or different or forward. But
yeah
then you get like leapfrogged over that completely in just a few years. Sometimes even the technology was difficult. Like in early Star Trek, they still had a logarithmic ruler instead of a computer on the
mm,
spaceship. So even like right before computers, nobody was able to imagine what computers will be able to do.
yeah
And
interesting
like Neil deGrasse Tyson said, like that he sort of gave up on being able to predict future technologies when he was a kid, was watching Star Trek, and the one thing he thought we will never figure out is the doors that open when you walk to them. Like literally the first thing that was solved right after that. He thought
yeah
like, what's that's just crazy.
we've had that for decades. That's pretty interesting. Well, the other interesting thing with The Expanse that I thought definitely applies to us here on Earth is the concept of Mars being once they develop their own kind of system and had their own society, that they basically were pushed much harder because it was so much harder to live on Mars, that they essentially advanced much faster than everyone else. They invented the Epstein drive, they invented all this new stealth
I
technology.
think the part of it was that most of the people sent there were like NASA level people. That they
Yes, they were
also
all
were
smart.
selected for
Yeah.
being more brighter or more like what do you call it? Not
Well,
industrious
let's
or
just say, yeah,
adventurous, but
educated, yeah, better educated, better,
motivated
and
also,
just
like generally
motivated.
motivated.
Yeah, generally motivated to make things better and to survive. And they had to in order to survive. Anybody who wasn't motivated or who was like a belter kind of mentality where they were more anarchist type fighter types, they wouldn't have survived on early Mars probably, right? So the only people, the entire culture evolved from people who were really good at dealing with adversity, right? And I kind of thought like the Belters probably should have been better at dealing with adversity too, but they were also kind of a very spread out people. They weren't all on one place. They were spread
Yeah,
out through 1,000 different ships and 1,000 different smaller asteroids and bases or whatever. So it's an interesting concept. But but I think it's interesting to see what we can learn from how society may develop even on Earth when we break into different factions or we break into different things. And you can kind of see it through our history how the people in the north, people who are in the harder climates, develop more technology faster, right? And how it takes adversity to get technology through. So right now we're facing one of the greatest threats ever, climate change, and everything related to that politically and environmentally speaking. So that adversity could very well push us to a new level of technology, like the Martians did, like the Belters did, and that's kind of optimistic. It's kind of hopeful in a way that adversity pushes us towards betterness,
it is.
towards
But
more working
now
together.
that I think about it, maybe it wouldn't be the best idea to send your brightest, most motivated people away from Earth.
Mm.
Uh, maybe there's like a bit of an
Yeah,
issue there that I never
yeah,
thought about before.
it's definitely worth considering. I mean, you've got to have obviously people on Earth that are going to continue to develop Earth too and use the Martian technology to make the Earth better and so on. But I think the concept of having a place to go or having a goal or having something for very what do you call it, adventurous people to be able to aspire towards. And that was the whole concept of the Expanse that I thought was the coolest part is that anybody, you get this group of four people. One's a Belter, one's a Martian, one's an Earther, and then one was kind of an Earther that was like the Mafia guy or whatever, the Mafia Earther. There was one that was like a off grid Earther, and then a Mafia Earther. And I just really like the dynamic of how it kind of pushed them together into a united tribe that was essentially saving the solar system over and over again in a million different ways.
Yeah,
So
that part of it is definitely inspirational. I just wanted to say there's like I think what it demonstrates, like illustrates, even if like it's very likely not going to develop exactly like that at all. If we
mm,
expand into space, even the solar system, there's like one sort of what it is like Mars. What it is an example of is that something that is not very explored in science fiction necessarily, but it probably should, and that's if you create colonies that are separated by light lag that's very long, I think within the solar system maybe it could still work because if you could get in days to anywhere in the solar
yeah,
system, it's not too big. But then if you start expand beyond that, and one of the interesting points raised by Isaac Arthur is that there's a whole bunch of stuff in between like what you consider to be solar systems. So you could just continuously expand from like rocks that you currently can't see because they're not illuminated by any objects. But if it's fuel, if there's something that's fuel on them, or
yeah,
if you have fusion and everything is fuel, then you can just
yeah,
like colonize all the like rogue planets and like all the things stuff that actually there's more stuff in between than in the parts that are lit up with the star. So you could just
right.
continuously
Dark
expand.
matter.
Yeah, so you could continuously expand, and there must be some limit of lag, like the distance between, that
Yeah,
essentially separates the civilizations from each other. And at some point, what you're doing is that at some point you're the British creating American colonies that will
yes,
eventually want to secede from you because they can,
yes,
because they're just far enough that they are
yeah.
able to hold their own political system. So in a way, you may not like at some point you may be a creating future enemies.
You
Is
might
what you're
be,
doing.
yes. And that's again exactly the concept with the Mars and the Belt is we have to be aware of this now, as we just start to even think about it, as we start to ponder what international humanism civilization might look like. We have to make doubly sure that Earth kind of has these principles in place of what does a safe, prosperous society look like? How does it deal with adversity? How does it deal with conflict in a humanist way? And if as long as we can get that very well established before we go into the stars, then hopefully any spacefaring civilization will take that kind of peaceful humanist attitude with them, and then it'll evolve
Well,
from there. So we basically have to evolve past our warlike tendencies in order to do this safely.
that's
I think.
again,
I hope.
I think that's a very rich space for science fiction to explore first, because there are so many potential problems with that, or
Yeah.
so many ways to try to solve it. Some of which are probably worse than the problem. It's like you could try to like genetically engineer people to constrain their
To not
tendencies
be
and
warlike.
stuff. That's
Yeah.
a sci-fi solution that somebody somewhere is definitely thinking of maybe trying to develop.
Yeah.
You could try to have some sort of like a cybernetic fix, like people having chips in their brains and then being like some sort of like again programmed in some one way or another, technologically programmed to exist
Yeah.
within certain limits. It's like one way, which is probably pretty dystopian way. Then you have this like okay, so they will adopt the principles. How long will it last? All politics, if you then let
Yeah.
people to like be free, like eventually like some amount of time passes and you won't recognize what, unless there is continuous integration between the different colonies, which if at least you could have faster than light internet. That's like the
That'd be
bare
great.
minimum for empire to be maintainable across any
Yeah.
size. It's at least information have to be able to travel almost
You,
instantaneously or faster than
It'd be
light.
hard. You need the Ansible from Ender's Game. That's what made Ender's Game interesting. Is they had I think they had about 150 colonized worlds that were all directly linked through Jane and through the Ansible. That was instantaneous communication, and the grand finale of the series was when they finally got instantaneous travel as well, using the super AI, which was very interesting. And he's kind of come up with one more book maybe to wrap it all up, but it's a very interesting concept on how that evolves. So definitely one of one of my favorite concepts of how it's done fairly well and fairly safely, managing kind of conflict. But I definitely feel like in order to get there, we definitely have to manage this conflict. Otherwise, we'll probably destroy ourselves, like in the Expanse,
Yeah, like
before we
yeah,
get there. So we've got to do
whatever.
it now.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever state you're in now is the state you will be exporting into
Yeah,
space. So before you start exporting something, you should make
so
sure
we've got
that
to get it
it's
right.
a good thing to export.